I'm Warren Smith with the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, and today's podcast features Emily Colson, the daughter of Colson Center founder Chuck Colson. In today's program, she asks the question, how can the church gain true credibility when it comes to defending life? Her answer is that a good place to start would be to openly welcome those with disabilities into our congregations. Emily, whose son Max has been diagnosed with autism, recently spoke to the staff of Focus on the Family about her journey with Max and how one church in particular affirmed life by affirming the value of Max. Here's Emily Colson.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. I was so excited to come to Focus on the Family and be among friends, and then I had to stand in the wall of shame with the Patriots fans, but I want you to know I am really used to standing alone. I am a Christian and I live in Boston, so I'm used to that. It's a joy to be here. Thank you so much, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. It's great to see you, John. It is wonderful to be among friends. And it's a joy to be here this morning and share some of my story with you. I have a beautiful son. His name is Max. He's 28 years old. He's awesome. And he has a diagnosis of autism. Nothing has been simple or easy in our lives, but God has made it beautiful. I've been a single mom with Max for most of those 28 years, which means I drink a lot of coffee. It also means that God has given me a beautiful perspective on life. I hope that this morning my message will be an encouragement to you in your life. I hope that it will affirm the value of every life, and I hope that it will remind us that God's design for His church is beautiful. Psalm 100 says, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Come before Him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is He who made us, and we are His." I have to tell you something about Max. Maybe my favorite thing about Max. Max loves church. Oh, that's such a great statement. It's huge because for years we couldn't figure out how to be in church. We didn't know how to do it, but only God could unfold His beauty in an impossible situation. Max loves church so much that he even loves other churches. He fell in love with this one church service that's played every single morning on television at 7 o'clock. It's played every afternoon at 3, and he loves it. Same service every day. That just works with his autism. He loves that sameness. It's not even our denomination, but what I love is that Max sees the common denominator of Jesus. I think one day we are going to figure out that this young man had it right. Well, we've gone to visit this church several times. It's in Massachusetts. It's about 150 miles away. Every time we've gone, we have had beautiful blessings. So on this last visit, we invited some friends to come with us. We invited my friend Christine and her son Christopher. Christopher is a little bit younger than Max. He also has autism, and Christopher is blind. Well, we each drove 4 hours from our different homes and met up there. We were about 20 minutes early, and I said, "Oh, Christine, we just have to go in because Max needs to soak everything up and kind of get used to the environment, and he's just too excited to sit outside." So we went in, and sure enough, Max is just looking all over this church and so excited. He's sitting in a pew. Let me just tell you, sitting in a pew, victory. We are sitting in a church. He's bouncing up and down, so excited. He's doing great. Well, I mean, okay, I grade on a scale. I know what it could be, and it wasn't that. So it was awesome. He's so excited in anticipation of the worship that every now and then he's throwing his hands up in the air and he's yelling, "We're gonna sing God's praises." Shouldn't we all come into church like that? Well, there was a woman on the other side of the church in a bright blue shirt. I saw her get up and walk towards us, and she leaned into my friend Christine. And she gave one of those head nods toward Max. And she said, "He doesn't belong." Now, I'm going to be honest. We are evangelical Christians. We just drove 4 hours to go to a Catholic church, and my first thought was, how does she know we're not Catholic? And then she kept going. She said, "He doesn't belong. I can't think. I can't pray. Can't you just leave? He doesn't belong." I want to tell you that what happened in that church has nothing to do with any denomination. It has nothing to do with that church. It doesn't even have anything to do with that woman. It has everything to do with our common human condition. There's a story in Matthew that I just love, Matthew 20. Jesus is leaving the city of Jericho, and he's on his way to Jerusalem. He's on his way to what is the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, right? What we celebrate as Palm Sunday. Now, Jesus had a mission before him greater than anyone in history or anyone to come. He kind of had a little on his plate. We think we're really busy, right? I got things to do. I have my to-do list. Jesus had to save the world. A little bit to do. He's leaving the city of Jericho, and there's a crowd around him. And he hears 2 blind beggars cry out to him from the side of the road. And do you know what happens? Do you know what the crowd around Jesus does? My NIV Bible says, the crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. Now, embedded in that is you don't have any value, right? Jesus doesn't have time for you. 2 disabled men on the side of the road. Jesus doesn't have time for you. You don't belong. And when the crowd tried to silence them, the 2 blind men cried out even louder to Jesus, knowing he is their only hope. And then, this moment that I love, Jesus stopped. With the crowd around him and the cross before him, Jesus didn't listen to the voices of the crowd. Jesus listened to the 2 blind men crying out for him. Now, Jesus turned to those men and he said, "What do you want me to do for you?" They asked for their sight. Now, we know Jesus could have healed those men from a distance and gone on his mission because he had a lot to do, but he didn't. He got close. He walked up to those men. He got very close. He put his hands on their place of brokenness and brought them healing. Jesus didn't listen to the crowd. Jesus stepped in. The voice of the crowd is very loud today, isn't it? Telling us which lives have value, which lives do not, pushing people aside, the disabled, the elderly, the prisoner, the unborn, the unwanted, the disruptive, the inconvenient. We see it with assisted suicide. We see it with abortion. We see it with selective abortion. In our country, our number of babies that we abort who are diagnosed with Down syndrome is upward of 67%. We know it's higher. We just don't have those numbers to track it. Last week, what we saw in New York should chill us to our core. A mother can abort her baby at any point during her pregnancy. And when that passed, well-dressed, well-spoken men and women rose to their feet to cheer. It takes little imagination for me to know who is next. When Max was diagnosed with autism, it was around 1 in 10,000, maybe 4 in 10,000. We just knew it was rare. Now the CDC reports that autism affects 1 in every 59 children, and a new federal study reports that it's more like 1 in 40 children. God calls us, His church, to step in, to defend life. But I want to ask you a hard question this morning. Will the church be able to defend life if the church is not yet able to sit beside that very same life for an hour in the pew on Sunday morning? Well, I want to take you back to that little church in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, this tiny little church where this woman in the bright blue shirt kept leaning into my friend, saying of Max, "He doesn't belong." Oh, I'm so thankful for a friend beside me. My friend Christine kept looking at this woman, and all she said was, "All are welcome. All are welcome." We had an advocate. We had somebody standing up for us, somebody saying, "I see this person's value and he belongs." We stayed in that church, and I'm just going to tell you that I'm not sure they've ever seen worship quite like that, quite that joyful. Max was so excited, bouncing up and down, singing at the top of his lungs. He is so thrilled. The priest would say something, and because he's memorized everything, the priest would say, "Peace be with you," and Max would answer, "And also with you." So excited. I don't know if we looked like church or a soccer match, but at one point, the priest, who was a very serious guy, just burst into this holy joy. He just burst into laughter. He couldn't contain it. When the service was over, I just put my arms around Max and hugged him, so overwhelmed by God's goodness, by God's beauty in every life. And as I was hugging him, I felt someone watching me, and I looked up, and it was the woman in the bright blue shirt, and she was smiling. 1 Corinthians 12:18 and 22 says, "God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. Those parts that seem weaker are indispensable." God calls us to Him not because we are worthy, but because He is great. God places value in every life, and He calls us, His church, to affirm that value. The voices of the crowd are very loud these days. But Jesus didn't listen to the crowd, and He doesn't want us to either. We, as the church, should look radically different than the rest of society because we are to be a reflection of the coming kingdom, the hope of the good to come. Now imagine if there were a blueprint for God's kingdom. Imagine if there were a guest list for God's kingdom. Here in Luke 14:13, Jesus is giving us a picture of the coming kingdom. He's using a banquet to describe that, and He gives us the guest list. When you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. When Max was very young, I could take him to church quite easily. He was a wiggly guy, he was really loud. And then we hit those very tough years that we went through. We stopped going to church, we stopped going everywhere. You know, sometimes It seems like church is made for those with a spiritual gifting of being quiet and sitting still. We don't have really either of those giftings. Sometimes we're trying to make the church so perfect that we forget that the people who are coming in aren't. Max was baptized. He gave his life to Christ when he was 13. My dad had the privilege of baptizing his grandson. He was a Christian. I thought, we can't be out of church when my son is a Christian. So I thought, I'm going to take Max back to the one thing he always loved about church when he was young. He loved it to be over. So we went when church was over. I thought, we can do that. We can do that milling around, and it's the coffee hour. I thought, we can do that. Well, we got there, and Max started helping some of the guys stack chairs, and I didn't really know what they were doing, but when we were about to leave, one of those men came up to Max. He put his hand on his shoulder as if he were knighting my son, and he said, Max, we could use you on the grunt crew. That's the cleanup crew. Well, I didn't know what it was. Max didn't know what it was, but he stood so tall and straight, and he gasped, yes. See, somebody took 1 minute out of their life to say, Max, you're needed, you're valued, you're indispensable. That one invitation changed our lives. For 6 years, we came to what we called backwards church. We came when church was over. We were there for the worship music at the end, and Max was there to serve. Everybody got to know and love Max and his joy of service. I want you to know that now he comes. Now he comes and he serves on the Welcome Center. Now he comes and he serves in kids' church, and he helps out down there. He comes and he serves by vacuuming. He does have the spiritual gift of vacuuming. And Max is a greeter. Oh, I wish you could see people coming through the doors of our church. They're carrying their burdens, the burdens of the week, the worries they're carrying, and they meet his joy and they are undone. I watch the armor just drop right off, and they are ready to worship. I think Max in front of our church says everything. I think it says all are welcome. Disability on the outside, disability, spiritual disability on the inside. Come. Max has found this spot where he loves to worship every Sunday morning. He climbs up on the sound booth platform. It's about 5 steps up in the back of the church, this little plywood platform, and he's up there every Sunday morning, and he is leaping and dancing. He's 190 pounds, so he's airborne more than he's on the ground, so when he lands, you really, really, really know he lands. He sings at the top of his lungs. He doesn't always sing the same song that everybody else sings. He has decided whenever there's a pause in the music, a pause in the singing, you hear from the back of the church, Max adds in a little bit of Handel's Messiah, and you'll hear, and he shall reign forever and ever. Always works, always appropriate, always fits. He was up there one morning, and he's leaping and dancing, and a friend was standing beside me, and I said, oh boy, I said, one day, Max is gonna go right through that floor, dunk tank style. He's gonna disappear. And my friend just smiled gently, and he said, no, he won't. And I said, well, why not? And he said, because months ago, some of the men in the church noticed exactly the same thing. Months ago, they got together and they reinforced the floor. Yeah. I so love this. Do you know what I love? Nobody told me. Nobody said, Emily, we really love having Max here, right? But could you just not have him here, right? He didn't really belong on the sound booth platform, right? But they didn't say, we love having Max here and he belongs, but he just doesn't belong here. Could you have him belong over there? Because that's what we do with people with disabilities. We want to welcome them in, but I'd like to welcome you in over there. People that make us uncomfortable, people who are a little bit different. They didn't do that. Nobody told me about the inconvenience, about how these guys had to get together and take their Saturday and come into the church just specifically to rebuild the sound booth platform where Max dances. Nobody told me about the inconvenience. Nobody told me about the wood they had to go and buy and the nails and the I-beam they had to truck in from Colorado, right? Nobody told me about the cost. Nobody told me about the inconvenience. They just held him up. That's what God calls us to do as the church, to hold each other up, to uphold life, to stand for what is good and right and true, to be like Jesus and step in. Our churches need to sound pro-life, and our churches need to look pro-life. There's a woman at our church named Kate. She came up to me one day and she said, Emily, I've been at this church for about a year. And she said, I came to this church because I heard how much this church loves Max. And she said she thought to herself, I think if that church can love Max, then I think that church can love me. Our pastor said about Max being in the church, we gave up perfect and we got something better. And that something better is that lived out faith that begins to ripple out into the community. And it's what people are hungry for. God has given me remarkable blessings in this journey with Max. And I will tell you that none of it has been easy. There are challenges that are beyond what I could begin to describe, and there are gifts and blessings and goodness, the goodness of God, beyond what I could describe. This is exactly where God calls us to step in, to rejoice with those who rejoice, to grieve with those who grieve, to step in to the joys and challenges with our families. If you know of a family living with disability, I want to tell you something that's kind of old school. Pick up the phone and call them. You will be amazed at how touched they will be. Ask if you can come and visit. Ask if you can do something with the family, something that they really love to do anyway, not out of their comfort zone, in their comfort zone, and join them there. A friend of mine, Kathy, who is raising a daughter with significant disabilities, said she loves when people say they are going to pray for her, but she said what she really desperately wants is someone to pray with her. Invite someone to church. Invite someone to stack chairs. You might just change a life. You might just change the church.
Hey everyone, Warren Smith here again, and I hope you're enjoying Emily Colson's presentation to a recent chapel service held at the headquarters of Focus on the Family in Colorado Springs. We'll get back to her powerful presentation, but I want to take a minute to tell you about an event that I think you're going to love. The Colson Center hosts its annual Wilberforce Weekend in May of each year, and this year it'll be May 17, 18, and 19 in the Washington, D.C. area. This year we asked the question, is Christianity still good for the world? Of course, we think the answer to that question is a resounding yes. And we've invited some great speakers to help us make the case, including Dr. John Lennox, Pastor Rick Warren, rapper and author Jackie Hill Perry, Christian apologist Jeremiah Johnston, and many others. To find out more information or to register, go to wilberforceweekend.org. That's wilberforceweekend.org. I look forward to seeing you there.
One day soon, we will detect autism in utero. Please help to make the church strong before that day comes, so that when that expectant mother gets that word, that diagnosis that her child she is carrying may have autism, oh yeah, she's going to be scared. She's going to be overwhelmed. And then please let her think, wait, I know someone. I love someone with autism. They're in my church. And I know how the church loves that person. And may she think, I think if the church can love that person, then I know the church will love my child. Many look at disability and question the goodness of God. We have big questions around disability. We look at people to try to understand who God is, right? But we have that backwards. We have to look at God to understand who people are. And He is the author of all of life. He is the creator of the heavens and the earth. He is the great I am. So we come to Him. We come to Jesus, our help and our hope, asking Him to help us with our own blindness in our hearts and in our churches that keeps us from seeing the beauty and value in every life. And He shows us not to silence the cries of those who want access to Him, even when those cries disrupt our plans and our church services, even our mission. I brought Max into church on Good Friday. Now, he has Sunday morning down. He's got his routine. He knows what to do, but you kind of mix that up and go at a different time, and it threw him off. The church was dark and somber and crowded. We sat out at the Welcome Center, and one of the deacons came out, and he said, Emily, tonight we're not going to bring communion out to anyone sitting at the Welcome Center. Do you think Max could go into the church and go forward and receive communion? And I looked at the church. I looked at Max. He's nervous. Our church had about 3 churches extra full of people that night, and I thought, good a night as any. So I drew out a plan for Max, and the bread is the body of Christ, and the juice is the blood of Christ. He knows that, right? I had basically 3 things for him to do. We get the juice, we get the cracker, and we get out. 3 things. I just need to do this fast. And every plan I ever write always has quiet voice. That's our goal. Let's see if we can stay quiet. So I waited till the end when I thought most of the people had gone forward so that we could just kind of go through like drive-through. That was the speed we needed. But when we got in there, a few people stepped in front of us. They didn't know. And then a few more people stepped in front of us. And all of a sudden, Max panicked. And he cried out. And I saw every head in the entire church turn around at exactly the same time and stare at us. I thought, oh my gosh, I just wanted to evaporate. I wanted to disappear. I knew Max was going to run. I'm looking to the side to look for pathways, but he didn't run. We took a few more steps forward, and Max cried out again in panic. And once again, every head turned around to look at us. But this time I could see they were smiling. They knew it was special. They were loving him forward. See, Max was afraid, but he knew that what he was going to was more important than his fear. 4 times Max cried out before he got to the front of the church. The pastor was so overwhelmed. And Max took the juice, And then he took a cracker, and I think he thought they looked pretty good, so he took a whole fistful of crackers. I didn't know what to do. What's proper etiquette? You can't drop them back in. So I just looked at the pastor, and I said, he just wants more of Jesus. I showed Max the plan, that now we go back to the lobby, but he didn't listen to the plan. He took the juice and he took the crackers, and with all eyes on him, he turned to face the congregation, and he recited scripture. He held up the bread, and he said, "This is my body broken for you. Take this in remembrance of me." He held up the juice, and he said, "This is the blood of the new covenant, shed for you. Take this in remembrance of me." And then, because he loves to watch the Catholic Church on television, he did this down on his knees. I loved it. I loved it. I watched as the faces in front of us went from smiles loving him forward to tears streaming down people's faces. People were overwhelmed. It was as if that disruption was God's way of placing a giant neon arrow in our church saying, "Watch where I'm working. Don't miss it." This is the church as God has designed it to be. Beautiful. Listen to Luke 14:13 again. When you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Did you hear that? Jesus isn't saying they will be blessed. Yes, Max and I are overwhelmingly blessed by being in the church, but Jesus is saying you as the church will be blessed. Jesus says, "Come, all who are burdened and heavy laden." God bids us, "Come, all who are thirsty, come to the waters. Come." Every life is precious, unrepeatable, irreplaceable, indispensable, one of a kind, and part of God's grand love story. Keep going, my friends. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep speaking up for life. Keep defending life. Keep upholding life. I am so very, very thankful for you. God bless you.
Thanks for listening to today's Breakpoint podcast with Emily Colson. And remember, for more information about the upcoming Wilberforce Weekend, which will take place May 17 through 19 in the Washington, D.C. area, come to wilberforceweekend.org. I'm Warren Smith, and I look forward to seeing you there.